Welcome to the JC podcast, a place where we get to explore and unpack life topics in a confusing and fast-changing world. I'm your host, James, and this podcast really is just a passion project of mine, being able to just discuss topics with the invitation also hopefully to invite guests to hear the wisdom and experience, and so that we can all hopefully, live a better equipped life. A bit about myself, if you're new to this podcast, thanks for listening. My name is James. I'm 30 years old. I'm single and I live in Melbourne, Australia. And I've been a pastor for just over 5 years. And I was overseeing the youth and the young adults in my church. But I'm currently on a sabbatical at the moment, just coming from burnout and just taking the next few months to just rest and recover, but to also kind of explore some passions, which includes this podcast as well. So thank you so much for joining me on this journey. Today, we're going to be talking and chatting about navigating the early navigating the early stages of burnout, and specifically from my context as a pastor burning out. I guess this topic came about because I am kind of navigating this time myself, but mainly because when I hit burnout as a pastor, I tried to look for a lot of resources out there of like, I'm burnt out, what do I do now? But the problem was that I couldn't find anything online. And even I guess quote unquote secular stuff, I couldn't find any kind of things of like, what do you do when you hit burnout? There's heaps of resources out there when it comes to like, how do you prevent burnout and like, how do you just, not get there? But I found that there were resources lacking about when you hit burnout, what do you do? So I just hope to share my experience. I'm by no means an expert in this field. I'm just someone who is just walking the path and trying to do my best. And yeah, hopefully I'm able to help some people along the way, especially if you've hit burnout or you know a pastor who's hit burnout. Feel free to send this to them. So I just want to kind of just set the scene of what happened before burnout, just to paint a picture for you guys. So I was a pastor at my church. I was full-time and I was leading a bunch of different ministries. So my official title was Youth and Young Adults Pastor, Associate Pastor for Youth and Young Adults. But I was also, in charge of like just generally overseeing the worship ministry. So I had a leader under me. I also directly oversaw the weekend service ministry, so our Saturday and Sunday services, making sure that was running. I also was directly overseeing our communications team, which included, media, so photography, videography. We had a graphics team that I was overseeing in terms of there was a leader that was leading them, and so I was overseeing that leader. And then, there's like any kind of communications was through that team. I'd also kind of had involvement with special events. So things like church camp, things like any kind of special service that we ran. So like Christmas and stuff like that. And I also, and so that was like that side of things. So weekend service, worship, comms, special events. And then I also directly oversaw the young adults ministry. I did have ministry leaders under me, so we kind of worked together. But then you're talking about leading like 100 plus 120 young adults, and like it would have been at that time maybe like 12 to 16 leaders, cell leaders, life group leaders. And then for youth, I was overseeing two youth ministry leaders, and so just a lot of my portfolio, a lot of my plates, and I would say that I really felt that I could balance everything. I really felt that I could do all these different ministries. Genuinely, I felt that I had a high capacity. I felt that I enjoyed doing a lot of these things. And I forgot to mention on top of that, I was doing tech and I was in charge of tech and IT, and then I was serving on the worship ministry as well. So I was like worship leading. I was like on the team. I was doing tech. So it's just like a lot of stuff that I haven't mentioned, but and I just generally felt that I love doing these things. So therefore, I don't see any kind of issue or problem. Now, a lot of people were saying hey, you got to be careful that you don't burn yourself out. And that was always something on my mind. And I knew that. But being single, being someone who has a lot of time and a lot of capacity, I was like, I think it's fine. I can do this, and I thought it was normal. So I really enjoyed serving. I wasn't serving from a place that was like, it wasn't a negative experience for me. I was very keen and willing to serve, and there's some things associated with that which I'll get into later. But I guess like another thing was that my whole life was church, and that kind of was like in my head, it felt good, but in hindsight, it wasn't good for me. And what I mean by that was like all my friends, like, so obviously work is church. Church life for me is church as well. It's work. That's a unique thing that I guess pastors and staff have to navigate, that work is church and church is work, that a lot of people don't necessarily have to experience, like people who volunteer. My friends, pretty much all of my friends were from church as well, which meant that comes with unique challenges as a pastor, as a leader in the church, as staff. For every other person, work is something separate. And so when they come to church, they can chat about, like the frustrations with their boss or frustrations with stuff at work. I just can't really do that, because as a pastor, and if you're a pastor, you understand this tension that, you can't just talk to members and complain about your boss, or you can't just talk to members and complain about other members. Like you just can't do that, right? So my life just revolved around church. My hobbies and my interests, so I love music. I love, photography, videography. That also was church, because I would serve on the worship team and I would serve on tech, and I would do that, and that's a big passion of mine. But then it became associated with work. Same with my interest in photography and videography. I would do a lot of that for church. So that was kind of the picture of where I was at. So I guess that leads to the question of then what led to my burnout, like what actually triggered it. And I think with most things, when something big happens, it's never just one thing. For example, if you happen to have an argument with your spouse or your significant other, like if it's really bad, it's never just one thing. It's always a build-up. And so I think burnout is very similar. It's not just one thing. But the one thing that did it for me, funny enough, was we had a big storms in Melbourne sometime around February. And my house was out of power for about essentially 3 days. And that just added so much extra stress. I had never had to deal with like a blackout for that long. And so things like, my fridge and my freezer, all the goods and stuff in there, I was like stressing about. And this was also at a point where there was so much happening in my work and a lot of stress that this was just the last straw. And so in isolation, I think it would have been fine, but yeah, this was just the last straw. And I think when I reflected on it, I realized that I had been running my life at like 100%, but I would always find ways to kind of manage that buffer and like bring it down so that it never went above 100. But then what I found was that this one event was just so unexpected that it just pushed me over to like 110%. And I would say, and I'll backtrack a little bit, even a week before that happened, I had a sense that I already was very close to burnout. Like I was literally teetering on the edge. And when this happened, I was like, okay, I'm in it. Like I knew 100% that I had hit burnout. But again, it's not just that one event. It's a build up. So I think the things that led to my burnout in terms of those building blocks, I kind of mentioned a few, like my whole life was church. So my hobbies, my friends, I didn't have hobbies. Excuse me. I didn't have hobbies. I didn't have interests. I didn't have friends outside of the church. So my whole world revolved around church, which is not healthy at all, because you feel like there's no escape. And if you are in ministry, you'll know that ministry never ends. You can always be doing more. And so that was a big part of it. I think a second one was like just doing too much and taking on too much. And I guess it's kind of funny, but also I generally found it challenging because people would say to me, James, you're doing too much. And in hindsight, they're right. But in the moment, like, you just find so much fulfillment in what you're doing because like all these hobbies and all these skills and all these interests, you're actually doing them at work. And so from my perspective, it's like, I want to do this. Like, I really find so much fulfillment. But then what happened was, I talked to my psychologist about this, was that because you're getting fulfilled through all these things at work, what happens is your personal life just naturally suffers because everything's about work, ministry and serving, and your personal self just kind of diminishes. So yeah, I took on too much. I did too much, but in my mindset at the time, I loved it. And so it wasn't something that I was like addicted to work or anything. I don't think that's who I am, but it's just that I just found so much fulfillment in it, but it was just way too much. So I think that's the second one. The third one was that I had a lot of internal and like mental, like negative beliefs about myself. So things like, I think a big one is like, I'm not good enough. And like, that's something that I had to work through with my psychologist before. So I was meeting a psychologist for about six months or so before I hit burnout. And I'm now seeing a therapist as well now for that. But something that I have to work through is like, I'm not good enough. And like, where does that come from? And yeah, but it's that belief of I'm not good enough makes you then like just keep going. Even when you have done something good, it's like, hey, I'm not good enough. And yeah, if you let that belief really take hold, it's so unhealthy. And that leads to burnout. And that was me. Another one was like people pleasing. And I realized probably not in the moment, but after probably in the second month of my sabbatical, I really realized that, hey, I think I have a chronic problem with people pleasing. And that can manifest in a way that you like and I was watching a podcast and I found it really helpful. So shout out to Healthy Gamer GG. That he's I can't remember his name, but he does a lot of like interviews with like Twitch streamers and stuff like that. And he did an interview with somebody, and they were talking about people pleasing. And I think that really resonated with me. The notion that when you people please, everything that you do right, it's not because of your doing. It's just like by chance. But then everything you do wrong, it's your fault. But when it comes to other people, when people do something right, then it's like, oh yeah, you did that. That was all you. But then when something wrong happens to somebody else, you're like, oh, that wasn't your fault. So it's like all the rules and everything applies to other people, but it doesn't apply to yourself. And the people pleasing as well, like you can very easily lose your sense of self because you're just trying to make other people happy. You're trying to do what other people want because you feel that would make them happy. And so I think I realized that about myself, that yeah, people pleasing is quite bad. And I think the last one is probably just being such a perfectionistic person. And like I'm a big person on excellence, but when that goes too far, it becomes perfectionistic and nobody's perfect. And so just always trying to just and I think that is associated with people pleasing, associated with I'm not good enough statement, because you just try to be the best. And that leads you to a place where you can just never be the best, and it's just endless cycle. So yeah, that was one thing. So I guess yeah, my whole life was church, taking on and just doing too much, and a lot of internal and mental beliefs that were negative. And I think the last one, which is a very personal one, was that like God, because I'm a pastor, right, and I'm serving God. Right, that is what pastors do. They serve the congregation, but ultimately they're serving God. But God had become more of my boss rather than my father. And we always talk about this thing that, we are children of God first, and like ministry is an outflow of our personal relationship with God. And I think that was a challenge for me to really realize that, hey, this is an issue. And it's something that I've probably have felt for a while. It's not a new thing that came up, but yeah, burnout really hit and now has given me that reflection that like, hey, I really need to do something about this. So I guess it's like a loss of intimacy with God. And it's like knowing, like, it's not that I don't believe in God. Like, I think cerebrally and mentally, like, I don't doubt there is a God at all. But I didn't feel a personal relationship with God. I recently stumbled upon this Instagram quote, and I love it because it's so convicting. And it said, just because you're doing it for God doesn't mean you're doing it with God. And I think that just really hits home. It's not something new, but it's such a good reminder that, just because you're doing it for God doesn't mean you're doing it with God. And at the end of the day, the thing he cares about most is just our relationship with him. He's God. And so he can do the ministry without us. Like, he actually can just do the ministry without us. Like, if I just suddenly stop doing ministry, like, the people that he had in mind to touch, he's still going to touch them. Like, he's still going to be able to do that. But the privilege that we get to have as sons and daughters of God is that we get to partner with him to, for ministry. And yeah, this phrase of just because you're doing it for God doesn't mean you're doing it with God, like, just really hit home recently. But yeah, I'm glad that was pointed out to me. So I guess, where am I now? So currently I'm in my 4th month out of my 6-month sabbatical. So, the church and the board was gracious enough to give me 6 months sabbatical, once I hit burnout, and I'm very grateful for that. And, it's been really nice just having that time to like just rest and take a break. So, I'm feeling quite well rested. So the kind of general tiredness has kind of worn away, I guess, if that's a way to put it. But yeah, and feeling fresh. And I just came back from a conference. So I went to the Alpha Regional Gathering Conference in KL, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And that was a super spontaneous trip as well. And that was really great for me because I felt that I had fresh vision, a renewed passion for ministry as well. That is a whole nother thing that, maybe we can have another episode to talk about. But I really came back from that conference really refreshed, and it was exactly what I needed. So I really praise God that, things fell into place for me to be able to get to that conference. I think right now as well, I'm just kind of in this space of just finding direction for what's next and just wanting to be more intimate with God again. Again, that whole thing of, God is my father rather than my boss. So that's kind of like a history of like what led me to burnout, and also a little bit of where am I at now. But as you read from this title, I really want to make this practical. So navigating, like, how do you actually navigate the early stages of burnout? And there's just a few things like that I listed down, just practical things that helped me to navigate my early days of burnout. So that's from like the initial kind of first few weeks to like even like the first 1 to 3 months. So so I'll just kind of head straight into it. So just some I have like 9 different points, but just really practical stuff that really helped me. So I think the first one was that I realized just how important it is to know how you like to be supported, and you need to communicate that to your family and friends. So when you hit burnout, sometimes it is hard if you don't know how you like to be supported, and that's part of the challenge as well. Because when I hit burnout, I kind of was expecting my friends and family to support me in a certain way, but I never communicated that, and partly it was because I didn't know how I like to be supported. And so part of me was like, I wanted my friends to actually message me, to check up on me, to like spontaneously like rock up at my door and stuff like that. But because I never communicated that to them, they didn't really do that. And it's not their fault because like I never communicated that. And that's so important in a friendship, in a relationship, that you have to communicate what you want. And so, but I guess part of it was because I just didn't know at that time what I wanted or how to articulate what I wanted. So I think a really important thing, if you know what you want, to just say, when you share with people, hey, I'm burnt out and this is a way you can support me, that's going to help them so much, and it's going to help you. And because you're not going to think about like, how come they're not helping me in the way that I want, when they just have no idea. So if you know how you like to be supported, just communicate that. If you don't know, figure it out, I guess. Chat with your friends and see what's possible. Number 2 is to get space from work that is causing you to burn out. So I think that's a really common thing that people say, is that once you hit burnout, you really need to separate yourself from work or whatever is burning you out. So for me, I began my sabbatical in April, but I kind of hit burnout in February. So there was this period of time which was about like 3 to 4 weeks where I was kind of away, and like, so I had some certain periods of time off because that was like the brunt of my burnout, and then that helped me to then determine like, okay, I really need to just take some time off. And so then I had like I think I had like 3 weeks or 4 weeks of like transitioning my role. So, but my initial brunt of it, I was like, I just need to stop work. Like, I just need to get away from this, because I realized that, I had all the signs of burnout. I had, a really short temper. Like, that's not usually me, but like I became very easily agitated and apathetic towards things. I wasn't effective in my work, and all the kind of signs of burnout. But yeah, big thing is, get space from your work. And that's causing you to, burn out, and completely stop if it's necessary, which often it is if you really hit burnout. The third one is to get with a therapist, get with a counselor, get with a psychologist to really just help you unpack what led to your burnout. And I think talking with a professional really, really helps. And that's something that I knew that I really needed to do, because I had wrapped up my time with my previous psychologist, and I was looking for someone who was more faith-based, because I am a pastor, and so I feel like that plays a big part of the conversations that I would have. And so I needed to find someone who was a Christian, who would be able to, understand, but who was also trained. So yeah, that has been really instrumental for me, and I'm still seeing my therapist as well. So yeah, just someone to really chat through stuff, unpack what led to your burnout, and to also maybe even dive into, so like the stuff that I was talking about, like the mental unhealthy thoughts, that was through, unpacking stuff, and also, just like whether there's related stuff to the way you were brought up and all that kind of stuff. Number 4 was don't stop having routine in your life. So when I had my first week of official sabbatical, after I handed everything over, which was the 1st of April, I kind of put myself in a place where I stopped having routine. And I think that was quite unhealthy for me, because I was just kind of like, given I was really tired, and like, yes, you need a rest. And maybe I will say this as well, really important, that my burnout wasn't as extreme as other people. So when I went to my GP to get an assessment on how bad my burnout was, I was probably right in the middle. But I know burnout can be extremely severe for some people, that they don't even want to get out of bed. Like, they can't even get out of bed. Whereas thankfully that wasn't my case. I think maybe I caught it a lot earlier on. And so I was just right in the middle. But then, so I know sometimes it's hard to have routine, especially if you just don't want to get out of bed. So this is more of like, I guess from my experience, I wasn't that far into burnout. But yeah, trying to have some sort of routine helps. So I was very intentional, like, I still got to do all my chores. I still got to, do the clothes washing on Monday, continue to do the dishes and wash that. Although sometimes I got a bit lazy. But yeah, don't lose the routine. I think the next one is, continue to do work that isn't your burnout work. So what that means is that sometimes I heard from a mentor that I was seeing that the best way to recover from burnout often is to keep doing work, but don't do the work that led you to burnout. So for me, it was like, still do something productive, still keep your mind active, because if you just kind of sit there and waste away, that really can lead you into depression. But if you keep your mind active, if you do something that keeps your brain going, keeps you motivated, gives you like, I don't know the full science behind it, but like gives you the endorphins and dopamine, whatever it is, right? But it keeps you a positive mindset. And so for me, initially it was a bit hard to do work because, my mentor suggested, do gardening. And I was like, I hate gardening. I'm never going to do gardening. But like just doing something. And so for me, I ended up, although it was a little bit late, in my second month, like towards the third month of my burnout, I started this podcast, started planning for it, and, I did some covers and stuff like that. So doing some sort of work that keeps you busy, keeps your mind active, really, really helps and goes a long way as well. Next one is to, build daily habits. So something which, so I guess working on good ones and stopping bad ones. So for me, that was, I knew that I wanted to be intentional about, I have so much free time now. Like, how can I build good habits and how can I stop bad ones? And so it's like, working on that. So for me, I downloaded a habit tracker app. And so I've been trying to do things, so basic stuff like have 4 glasses of water, take your vitamins every day, try to go for a walk for at least 15 minutes, that kind of stuff. So even simple stuff I think is good. And I think for me, being very goal-focused, task-oriented, I like to have the that kind of sensation of like actually ticking something off and having checklists and being able to see that, hey, and mark progress, like kind of like a game. So for me, that really worked. It may not work for you, and so you don't have to do that, but that was what worked for me. Really think about how can you develop good habits as you're in burnout. And I know it's really hard, but really start small. So for me, it's just like, just take vitamins. Like it's not hard to take your vitamins, and then that's one thing that you've done for the day. And so just kind of habit stacking, and so if you haven't read Atomic Habits, it's a great book. And so just kind of doing what the book suggests in that. So habit stacking and just finding easy routes and taking it step by step. So number 7, start that passion project. If you've ever thought about doing a passion project, now is the time. If you've got an extended period of time that you have free, like do the thing that you never thought that you had time to do. So for example, I really wanted to do this podcast for about a year or so. I just didn't have time. And I was just like, I just don't have time for that. And obviously I was just already tired. So I was just like, you know what? I should just do this. And so do that passion project, whatever that may be, whether it's, you always wanted to learn baking, you wanted to learn a language. Something which I started doing was also Duolingo, although I think that was like a trend that kind of happened, but I started learning Korean. So do that passion project, do that thing that you never had time to do, but now you have time to do as well. So just start that passion project. Number 8, I think this is really important. Don't stop attending church/Christian community. But it's probably going to look different from your normal one. So for me, because I was burnt out because I was a pastor at my church and I was burnt out, it was very difficult for me to continue to stay at that church because you would, just on a very practical note, I needed that time and space away from church because it was work. But I guess the challenge was that, people would maybe feel like they still needed to, check in with me every time they saw me or, come to me for different things or issues. And I would feel that I need to do something about it. So I think that separation from my church was a really healthy thing. I still kept in touch with a lot of my close friends from church. So don't stop that. So I think that's another thing. Maybe don't stop attending church/Christian community/friends. So I think your friends are going to be really important in supporting you during this time. So I still kept in contact with a lot of my close friends. But I also knew that part of my challenge or my issue that led me to burnout, maybe this is a bit more unique to me, was that I didn't have a Christian community outside of church. And so I knew that during this time, I wanted to intentionally, invest in time and energy into building new friendships and connections with people. So, I kind of tried to find different churches. In the end, I was like, going kind of not really church hopping, but I was like trying out a few different churches, thought that I landed on one, but in the end, I found another church and things are going pretty good with that. And, just great community, which is what I really need. So I'm probably going to, invest into that community during my time, the rest of the 3 months that I have. But I think it's really important that you don't stop going to church and don't just attend church online, but also just go to a physical church. So I went to it's not really a mega church, but a pretty big church in my area during my initial kind of 1 or 2 months. And although I didn't have community there, it was just really nice to just, for the first time, and pastors, you would know this, to just receive and not feel like you have to do anything, and have no obligations, but you're just there purely just to receive, and you can just worship so freely. Nobody knows you. And so if they do an altar call, no one knows you, just go up. And so that was me. Like I responded to a lot of like altar calls and went up for prayer and stuff like that. So, so I think that's a big benefit. Like nobody knows who you are and you can just be free to just be a child of God in that moment and not feel that you have to worry about any kind of responsibility. So that was a big blessing for me, to just kind of be there and then I could just leave if I wanted to. But of course, the more that months went on, I wanted kind of community and stuff like that. That's number 8. Last one is number 9. Do things that push you out of your comfort zone. So I think this is more of like, it may be unique to your situation, though I think it's good for everybody. But I understand maybe this is not for everyone. But anyway, this really helped me because because there's 2 different personality types. You have people who are very like structure, like plans, and then there are people who are like just very spontaneous. So for me, I'm more of a structured plan person, but I do every now and then like to dabble in the spontaneous, but then that does take energy. It does take time, and it takes a lot of mental, energy to be able to do something like that is out of your comfort zone. But then I find that sometimes it is when we're out of our comfort zone, that's when we can actually grow and where God really pushes us to grow. And I guess just like being obedient and exercising faith. And so for me, I had to really put that into practice. So something that so I told you I recently went to a conference in KL, and the journey of that was just different times of putting myself out of my comfort zone and then listening to like what the Holy Spirit was leading me to do. So the first one was like, I was kind of just like doing my own thing during my sabbatical, and I got invited to a Christian singles conference. And I was like, oh, do I want to go to this thing? And I was like, probably not. Like, I'm not that keen on, like I didn't have the energy or the desire to catch up with people or like meet new people. But I was just, after a few weeks or so, I was like, you know what? I should probably do it. Like part of my sabbatical was to get to know people and to meet new people. And so I was like, you know what? I should just do this and, just take that leap of faith. So I signed up. And even after I signed up, I was like, yeah, I'll probably go, but there's still that small chance that I won't go. And then literally in the morning that I woke up to go to this conference thing, I didn't want to go. And I was like just having like a wrestling and a conversation with God. And I was like, God, I really don't want to go to this thing because like I have a bit of social anxiety. And I was like, I just don't like meeting new people. And like I have to drive all the way to like Hawthorne, which was like, 30 minutes away. I have to find parking and it's just meeting totally new people. And it's just out of my comfort zone. And I just really didn't want to do it. But then I just had this, discourse with God, conversation. And, I really felt that God was saying, you can do this. You should go to this, and prove to yourself that you can do this. And it's like, hey, if you really don't like it, you can leave. So that was like the consolation that God gave. So I was like, okay. So I dragged myself out of bed. I went to this thing, and it was great. Like, I think just being able to meet people. And funny enough, the thing that happened, which was unexpected, was that by chance, I happened to meet a pastor that was there, and I really felt like I could connect with this guy, shared about my time on sabbatical from burnout, and I felt that there was a lot that I could learn from him. So just the conference finished, and I managed to connect with him on Instagram, and I was just like really random. And I was just like, hey, I'd love to pick your brain on some things and love to catch up for a coffee if you're down. And so we set a date, and then I also felt like, oh, maybe I should attend his church as well. And so, we caught up, and he was the one who suggested like, hey, this conference, by Alpha and Kale might be really good for you. And so I think like, the kind of putting out my conference was like the one thing going to the conference. The second one was just even asking this guy to go for a coffee to like, just ask for advice. That in itself was also putting myself out of my comfort zone. But then even more so was doing a spontaneous trip to Kale. Like the conference was going to be 1 week in 1 week's time. And like, that's super spontaneous. But then as I thought about it, and as I talked to some people about it, I was just like, I probably feel like I should do this. This will be really good for me. But again, I was feeling hesitancy about it. But anyway, it was Friday. I booked the flights, and I was in Malaysia on Monday. So super spontaneous decision. But I felt that each step of the way, obedience and being out of my comfort zone really grew me a lot. And if I had, so I guess there's kind of 3 steps of obedience, the singles conference, meeting up with this guy, and then going to the conference in KL. I kind of learned different things along the way. It wasn't that like I only learned things when I went to KL, but I learned something when I went to the conference. I learned something when I met with this guy. I learned something when I went to the KL conference. And so I think just putting yourself out of your comfort zone just leaves so much room for God to just grow you and to mold you into what he has planned for you next in this next season. And I really believe that I am entering into a new season. But I don't think I would have been well prepared for that or ushered into that if I didn't take those steps of faith and put myself out of my comfort zone. So yeah, I think that's probably a big thing. And so I think for you practically, if you're a pastor who's just navigating burnout, or if you're just someone who's non-Christian navigating burnout, I would say try to find things that really push you out of your comfort zone, because I think that's where growth really happens. So those are kind of like 9 practical things. And I guess like to end, like just to answer the question, like what am I working on and where do I hope to be in the next 3 months? Because I'm like halfway through my sabbatical. So I think some kind of things that I'm working on and where I hope to be is just continuing to think about and seeking direction on God and what's next for my life. As I said, I feel like I'm moving into a new season. And so just really seeking God about that. Number 2 is just reflecting on what I valued or have, really valued during these 3 months, because my life is very different now compared to working full time. And just kind of the things that I really value now in these 3 months, what are some of the things that I want to keep going forward? So for an example, one of the things I really love is just this kind of slower pace of life and not being so tired and not being so busy all the time. Like I am somewhat busy. Like I'm trying to at least schedule one thing to do a day, whether that's meet up with someone or go out somewhere. But I'm not keen on just like being so tired all the time. And so that's something that it's like, okay, that's a reflection that I had during this time. And I want to keep that, entering into the next season of life so that I have energy and time to do things that make me uncomfortable. Another one is just, continuing to establish good habits. Again, I'm still working on that. Nowhere near perfect. Still a long way to go, but it's the consistency which matters. And another one is to continue to build good friendships and connections outside of my church. I found that is really important. So if you're a pastor and you don't have that, I would suggest to really try and get connections outside of church, because that's going to be your support. Because people in ministry just get it. And I think that's something that I realized that not that your friends can't understand your struggle, but people in ministry are just able to empathize and understand in a way that other people can't, especially pastors, because they just know what it's like, and there's no judgment, I feel, because they live it. So building good connections outside of my own church, and then continuing to draw near to God and to have a healthy prayer life. I think that's something that, again, it's about the intimacy. It's about being a child of God, and so that's something I'm still working on. So, that kind of is everything, and I guess it kind of concludes the end of this podcast. But I guess to summarize, just the practical things to navigate burnout is to know how to be supported, get space from your work, get a therapist, get a counselor, talk through stuff. Don't stop having routine in your life. Continue to do work that isn't your burnout work. Keep your mind active, build daily habits, start that passion project. Don't stop attending church/Christian community, and do things that push you out of your comfort zone. So if you're a pastor and or if you've hit burnout, and pastor who has hit burnout, or you have hit burnout, I hope this has encouraged you in some way. Again, I said I'm not an expert, but I'm just sharing my experience with navigating early stages of burnout. And thank you so much for listening, and I hope it has been insightful and entertaining. Maybe I'll do another kind of part 2 podcast. Maybe 3 months later, just like how I navigated the second half of my sabbatical. So please let me know if you do want to see/hear that. As always, if you think this episode has been beneficial or would benefit somebody that you know, please do share it with them. If you'd like to hear more about this content, and please follow, and you want to follow us on this journey, you can follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or even on YouTube if you're watching this on YouTube as well. If you have any feedback, testimonies, or requests for future topics, you can email me at jameschia.ministries@gmail.com, or you can DM me on Instagram @_JamesChia. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what's working and what's maybe not working. How can I improve and make this better for you guys? Ultimately, my prayer is that this podcast is able to bless people and to help them through navigating their life, and specifically, I guess, young adult years. I just feel like I want to just pray for the pastors out there who may be navigating burnout. And so I'm just going to end this time with prayer. So God, just thank you so much for, just being there for us always, even when, there are times where we, make ministry more of a priority than our relationship with you. So God, forgive us of that time. Of those times where we have done that. But I just pray for the pastors out there, especially, or leaders who are feeling burnt out, who are navigating the early stages of burnout. I just pray that, whatever we've chatted about today, Lord, that something will stick, something will be helpful, and that they'll be able to, really navigate this time in a way that is, glorifying to you, where that is healthy, and that they can navigate it well. And I just pray that ultimately they won't lose their passion and their fire for serving you. And I pray that, you would send people to surround them and really give them the support that they need, just as you have done for me. So we thank you for this opportunity, Lord, that I get to have to share in my journey. And I just pray that, you bless whoever has listened to this podcast. So we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. So thanks for joining. This has been the JC podcast. I hope you have a blessed week ahead. God bless.